Chapter 41. Breaking Through to the Half, Saint. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 41. Breaking Through to the Half, Saint. Realm, someone you should not provoke. Translator. Henyi Translations Editor. Henyi Translations. After seeing the weapon Lin Ran was using, they realized that it was a dead branch that he had picked up from somewhere. Everyone was shocked. In just one move, he could actually break Elder Xie's famous ultimate technique. Where did this monster come from? Was he still human? This was what everyone thought. King Zhao and the others were dumbfounded. They couldn't believe what they were seeing. What kind of a figure was Elder Xie? Moreover, Elder Xie used his famous ultimate technique, but he couldn't even last a round and was instantly defeated. What are you waiting for? Go and get him. Lin Ran sighed faintly. I just wanted to persuade you not to use force. You chose this yourself. He took out a sword that was emitting cold light and the aura around him changed drastically. His black eyes were terrifying and he looked at everyone like they were already dead. If Lin Ran was taken as nobody before, at this moment, he was like a sharp sword unsheathed, dazzling everyone. For some reason, King Zhao felt an unprecedented fear in his heart, as if something bad was about to happen. He pretended to be calm. You're just bluffing. No matter how powerful you are, can you compare to an army of thousands? Everyone, don't be fooled by this kid. He's just acting. There are so many masters present. Why should we be afraid of him? Although he said that, the cold sweat on his forehead betrayed King Zhao's true feelings. For some reason, the fear in his heart became greater and greater. Elder Xie felt the same way as King Zhao. They didn't know that this was the power of a senior grandmaster. If anyone can bring me his skull, I'll confer him the title of State General. King Zhao suppressed the fear in his heart and spoke. The other masters also joined the battle, showing all the abilities they had. Charge! Countless people swarmed towards Lin Ran. His expression was calm, and his cold face was reflected by the sword light. Every sword beam was accompanied by countless sword energy that attacked with a thunderous force. Before those people could get close, the sword energy swept across, causing blood to splash everywhere. It was done within a matter of seconds. As if he was cutting grass, the sword wave rippled out. Wherever it passed, no one survived. Before those masters could react, they were already beheaded. Their eyes widened with fear written all across their faces. The remaining people who had yet to attack were so frightened that they broke out in cold sweat. Their legs were extremely weak and they could not even hold the weapons in their hands as they fell to the ground with a clang. This person was probably a demon. Everyone was so shocked that they did not even dare to breathe loudly, afraid that they would further provoke the person in front of them. No matter how tempting an offer King Zhao gave, no one dared to act rashly. The scene in front of them was too terrifying, and the air was filled with the smell of blood. Even if everyone liked fame and fortune, they liked their lives above everything else. BDNV corpses were everywhere, and blood was flowing on the ground until it formed a stream. At this moment it was slowly flowing towards Lin Ran, as if it had been summoned. A bright red color was condensing on the tip of the sword and immediately shone forth. The sword absorbed the blood of countless people to nourish itself. The color was even more dazzling as the blood thickened, making it look especially evil. The powerful pressure almost made everyone stop breathing. The sword energy and blood energy intertwined, forming two strong auras that soared into the sky. From afar, the red light was visible. He was not an ordinary person. His strength had long surpassed that of a grandmaster. Only then did King Zhao and Elder Xie realize that they had offended someone they shouldn't. However, it was too late. Lin Ran seemed to have sensed something and looked up at the sky. A crack appeared in the sky like a huge eye, watching everything on the ground. What the hell is this? It's too terrifying. I've never felt such an aura before. Everyone was terrified. They looked at the sky above them as if they were in another world. A blood moon slowly appeared and enveloped Lin Ran. At this moment, he was transforming. Inside his black pupils, a blood moon gradually appeared, as if a true demon god had descended. As time passed, the crescent moon gradually became rounder. At the same time, the pressure emitted by Lin Ran became even more terrifying. What would happen when the moon became full? No one dared to imagine it. No. We can't let him. Elder Xie's pupils constricted as if he had realized something. His face was filled with fear, and his facial features twisted. He suddenly attacked with all his might, wanting to catch Lin Ran off guard. An unprecedented force gathered in his hand. The destructive force seemed to be able to destroy everything. It was so fast that no one could see Elder Xie's movements clearly. Seeing that he was about to succeed, Elder Xie revealed a sinister smile. Go to hell. However, Lin Ran suddenly turned around and gazed at him faintly. With that, the world fell into silence. Elder Xie was immediately sent flying 100 meters away, drew a parabola in the air, and fell heavily to the ground. Then, he suddenly spat out a large mouthful of blood, his face as pale as paper. At this moment, Elder Xie's meridians were completely severed. Even if he could recover in the future, most of his foundation would probably be gone. Chapter 42. Everyone below the half, Saint. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 42. Everyone below the half, Saint Realm is a nobody translator. Henyi Translations Editor. Henyi Translations, he's about to break through to the half, Saint Realm. Elder Xie spoke with a trembling voice as if his tongue was twisted. After saying this, he seemed to have no strength left. King Zhao and the others' faces contorted. It was as if an invisible hand was gripping their hearts tightly, making them stop breathing. Half, Saint, what kind of a figure was that? Anyone below the half, Saint Realm was but a nobody. Their lives were at Lin Ran's mercy. No wonder he dared to come alone. No wonder a grandmaster was nothing in his eyes. It was too late for everyone to realize this now. At this moment, no one could stop Lin Ran. After all, even Elder Xie, who was the most powerful among them all, was already on the verge of death, let alone them. When the others saw this, they trembled in fear. They were no longer as arrogant as before. They had provoked someone they shouldn't have. Looking at the unconscious Elder Xie, Zhou Hao made a prompt decision. Sect disciples, listen up. Retreat immediately. There was an indescribable panic in his tone. He looked in Lin Ran's direction with an unprecedented solemn expression and had a hunch. Perhaps this would be an unprecedented calamity for the Tao-seeking sect. This time, the Tao-seeking sect had suffered a great loss. They had initially thought that they would be able to take advantage of this opportunity to obtain the glory of being the #1 sect in the world. Whether it was recruiting disciples or expanding their influence in the future, it was very beneficial. Who would have thought that this would be the outcome? According to Elder Xie's current state, he would probably be crippled if not dead. They had lost a grandmaster-level figure and other powerful disciples. It could be said that the casualties were heavy. Zhou Hao was filled with regret, but it was too late now. In the blink of an eye, the disciples of Tao-seeking sect had disappeared without a trace. The speed at which they disappeared left the cultivators of the other sects dumbfounded. Let's leave too. We can't stay here for long, even a large sect like the Tao-seeking sect is like fleeing. What are we waiting for? The people from the other sects also hurriedly fled. After all, even Elder Xie, who had the highest cultivation, had ended up in such a state. There was no one more powerful than Elder Xie among them. As martial artists, they knew better than anyone how terrifying the power Saint possessed. With Lin Ran's involvement, the table was turned completely and the situation became one-sided. Lin Ran's gaze landed on the others. I don't want to start a massacre. You know what to do next. The other vassals were like frightened quails. They kept nodding, afraid that this demon god would use them as blood sacrifices. Soon, the empress received the report. Your Majesty, something seems to have happened to the rebels. Those cultivators are no longer attacking the array formation. The empress didn't expect Lin Ran to be so fast and was in disbelief. Could it be him? Who is His Majesty talking about? Facing countless confused gazes, the empress shook her head and said, let's go and see what's going on. When everyone walked out of the array formation, they realized what a tragic scene it was outside. There were mounds of corpses, all of which were rebels. It could be seen how intense the battle was just now. Everyone was stunned on the spot. Then, they were overjoyed. Could it be that reinforcements are here? Why didn't we hear anything if the battle was so intense just now? Then, everyone was puzzled. While everyone was discussing, the empress was experiencing a complicated feeling. She had guessed that Lin Ran must be hiding his real strength, but she did not expect his strength to be so almighty. The empress still didn't know that Lin Ran had already broken through to the half-saint realm. The remaining rebels were also in a state of disunity. Hurried footsteps came from not far away. There seemed to be a lot of people approaching. Your Majesty, be careful. Everyone carefully protected Emperor Xing Yuan in the center and stared at the approaching group of people warily. It was the vassals, led by King Zhao. Unexpectedly, they had tied up a bunch of martial artists and brought them over. However, at this moment, King Zhao was in an extremely sorry state. He no longer looked as high-spirited as before. Please forgive us for failing to come in time to save you, Your Majesty. The vassals all knelt on the ground and said indignantly, we received news that someone colluded with the martial artists to plot a rebellion. Fortunately, His Majesty was not injured. Otherwise, we will forever be condemned by the people. Those who did not know the truth would think that these people were loyal to their emperor. The people around Emperor Xing Yuan were dumbfounded. A few ministers looked at each other, their faces as pale as paper. What turned out was completely different from what they had planned. Initially, they planned to work with the rebels from inside to take down the city together. Emperor Xing Yuan was not a fool. For the rebels to be able to take down the city gate so quickly, there must be their collaborators inside. When they returned to the imperial city, they would definitely die. Sun Zhanghong and the others were sweating profusely as they looked around. It was almost impossible for them to escape. The empress did not expose these vassals. After all, it was not beneficial for her to fall out with them now. All right. I will definitely reward you. The empress said the last few words meaningfully. After all, there was still a long way to go. It was not too late to settle the score later. The vassals could not help but heave a sigh of relief. At least for the time being, Emperor Xing Yuan would not find trouble with them. Soon, all the martial artists who did not manage to escape in time were killed, including King Zhao's army. Countless people died, and the rest disarmed and surrendered. Lin Ran had long left without saying a word. The statesman thought that they were rescued by a mysterious reinforcement, so they did not ask too much. Chapter 43. Cleaning the Imperial Court. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 43. Cleaning the Imperial Court. Translator. Henyi Translations Editor. Henyi Translations. The imperial city quickly returned to its usual order. However, after being washed for a long time, the blood stains on the limestone bricks still left dark red marks, as if they were trying to remind people of something. This coup came and went quickly. Looking at the dignified Emperor Xing Yuan sitting on the dragon throne, no one in the royal court dared to breathe loudly. Your Majesty, we've killed about 10,000 rebels this time. The troops led by King Zhao have all been sent to prison. How should Your Majesty deal with them? Good. Kill anyone who is King Zhao's trusted aide without mercy. The rest of the people who surrender can be dealt with leniently. The men will be executed together with King Zhao, and the women will be sent to the border. Does anyone have any objections? Those ministers who used to be full of opinions in the past did not dare to have any objections at this moment. All the courtiers knelt on the ground. Your Majesty is wise. The Empress nodded. The fact that King Zhao could have advanced to the imperial city so smoothly meant that there must be his collaborators within the walls. The moment Emperor Sheng Yuan finished speaking, Sun Zhanghong's heart skipped a beat and cold sweat broke out on his forehead. He had expected this day to come since King Zhao failed. However, he still had some hope. Even if he was collaborating with King Zhao and the others, it was done very secretly. Sun Zhanghong, do you admit your crime? In the next second, Emperor Sheng Yuan's voice sent a shudder down his spine. Sun Zhanghong knelt on the ground in shock and said with a trembling voice, I don't know what crime I committed. You colluded with King Zhao to rebel and intend to overthrow the Heavenly Saint dynasty. Your crimes are unforgivable. Oh no. This was the first thought in the minds of Sun Zhanghong and the others. Your Majesty, please spare me. There must be a misunderstanding. I'm loyal and devoted to your Majesty. I definitely won't do such a treasonous thing. Sun Zhanghong and the others still wanted to defend themselves, but when the Empress threw the evidence in their faces, they were instantly speechless. None of the officials who were on good terms with Sun Zhanghong in the past dared to stand up and plead for mercy for him. After all, this was a serious crime of treason. If they were not careful, they would be implicated. However, the Empress did not intend to let them off easily. I heard that Lord Zhang, Lord Li, and the others are on good terms with Sun Zhanghong. Why didn't you all discover the plot he's planning? The face of the officials who were called out immediately turned pale. They said in fear, Your Majesty, Sun Zhanghong is cunning and ambitious. We were deceived too. We definitely won't collude with such a traitor. The Empress said meaningfully, Is that so, Your Majesty, please spare us. We know our mistake. Your Majesty, please spare me. A few more important ministers of the imperial court were dragged out. The Empress was furious and ordered a thorough investigation of this rebellion. She took this opportunity to gather power and get rid of those who were disloyal. The Empress also used this opportunity to take back most of the power she'd lost in the imperial court, laying the foundation for future prosperity. This incident was later regarded as the Heavenly Saint incident. These days, the Empress had been busy dealing with the rebellion from morning to night and had never stopped. Finally, she found an opportunity to come to Mount Sword. Lin Ran seemed to know that she was coming. The Empress placed her left hand on her chest and bowed respectfully. This was the highest etiquette of the Heavenly Saint dynasty, and it was personally given by the current emperor. I really have to thank you this time. If not for you, I'm afraid I wouldn't have been able to survive this calamity. The Heavenly Saint would have fallen into chaos again. The Empress had many questions, such as why did Lin Ran hide his cultivation level previously? He could have done something great, but he chose to stay in Mount Sword. In the end, she didn't ask. What do you want? Gold, silver, treasure, or fame and fortune? As long as I can give you, I will. I can even confer you the title of a king. After experiencing the rebellion, the Empress could still be so generous. It was obvious how much she trusted Lin Ran. It was not an exaggeration to say that Lin Ran was her most trusted aide as of now. He had saved the country. No one knew better than the Empress about Lin Ran's contribution in this rebellion. It could be said that without Lin Ran, no one would know who would currently be sitting on the throne. The Emperor promised to give him priceless treasure, but Lin Ran was not moved at all. I'm used to being free and unrestrained. I think the position of the guard commander suits me quite well. There's no need to change anything. Seeing that Lin Ran was calm and unmoved, the Empress admired him even more. Although the sword god is not around now, I believe that with you around, no one will dare to invade the Heavenly Saint dynasty. No matter what I said today will still count in the future. If you change your mind, you can come to me. The Empress seemed to have thought of something. I've dealt with most of the people in the imperial court, but I don't have enough army at my disposal to deal with the rebels in the martial world for the time being. However, they participated in the rebellion after all and shouldn't get away with it unpunished. Don't worry about this. Leave them to me. Those martial artists thought that they could rest easy after escaping, but they didn't expect Lin Ran to have no intention of letting them off. Then I'll wait for your good news. Chapter 44. Within one move, the world was in an uproar. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 44. Within one move, the world was in an uproar. Translator. Henyi Translations Editor. Henyi Translations. After resolving the crisis of the dynasty, Lin Ran returned to Mount Sword to stabilize his half-saint cultivation. 3 days later. A terrifying sword intent spread out from Lin Ran's body, and sword marks were suddenly engraved on the surrounding stone walls. Lin Ran slowly opened his eyes and said in a low voice, "Everyone below the half-saint realm is just an ant to me. Now that my sword heart has been completely stabilized, sitting here brooding over cultivation won't do me any good. It is time for me to go into the secular world and take a look." With that, Lin Ran stood up and arrived at the peak of Mount Sword with a sway of his body. Metal. As Lin Ran shouted, golden sword intent soared into the sky from all over Mount Sword. Rora, a huge white tiger formed by golden sword intent, roared at the sky, looking like a majestic king. Wood. With another shout, countless green sword intent filled with life quickly gathered, and a green dragon gradually condensed. Rora, the azure dragon, roared at the white tiger in the distance with a hint of fear in its eyes. Earth. Lin Ran ignored the 2 divine beasts formed by sword intent in the sky. As soon as he finished speaking, a divine beast Kylin condensed from earthen sword intent slowly rose. Water. The divine beast, the black tortoise, floated up. Env Fire. The divine bird, vermilion bird, cried and flew into the sky. The moment the divine beasts that represented the power of the 5 elements gathered in the sky above the entire dynasty changed drastically. From the nobles to the peddlers, they stopped what they were doing and looked up at Mount Sword. Many of the weak-willed people even bowed and said in awe, "Long live the sword god." Among these people, only Emperor Xing Yuan's eyes widened in disbelief. Only she knew that Grandpa Sword God had already died. Now, the only one guarding Mount Sword was her Imperial Guard commander, Lin Ran. Emperor Xing Yuan muttered, "Is a half-saint so powerful? How did he become so powerful in just a few years?" At this moment, Emperor Xing Yuan was alone. If anyone else was around, they would definitely realize that he was no longer as decisive as when he was in the court. Instead, he was like a girl who was infatuated. Lin Ran, who had summoned the power of the 5 elements to form divine beasts, was sweating profusely. He wiped the sweat off his forehead and smiled bitterly. He just wanted to test his current cultivation level. On a whim, he thought of the 5 divine beasts that represented the power of the 5 elements in his previous life. Therefore, he condensed the sword intent into the image of a divine beast according to his memory. Unexpectedly, the moment the white tiger divine beast condensed, a trace of the will of the world with metal attributes landed on the white tiger divine beast. As a half-saint, he had already seen through the will of heaven and earth. He naturally knew that this trace of will was not something a cultivator at the initial stage of the saint realm could resist. At that moment, he even felt that the sword intent that filled the sky seemed to have escaped his control. If not for the fact that he had already consolidated his half-saint cultivation, he would probably have completely messed up his sword heart. At that time, the sword intent that filled the sky would definitely go out of control and the surroundings of Mount Sword would definitely be turned into hell. Looking at the 5 divine beasts roaring and confronting each other above his head, Lin Ran felt a headache coming on. Although he could barely suppress the 5 elements divine beasts with his own will, he could still feel the resistance of the 5 elements divine beasts against him. Moreover, this resistance was becoming stronger and stronger. What should I do? Just as Lin Ran was in a terrible fix, a black and a white light suddenly spread out from his body. Two rays of light flashed into the air and formed a taiji pattern. It seemed to be devouring each other, but also seemed to be slowly rotating. The power of yin and yang kept fusing, and a peaceful aura spread. The surrounding five elements divine beasts immediately calmed down and looked up at the taiji pattern. The ruthlessness in their eyes dissipated in the blink of an eye. Lin Ran frowned and looked at the sky. Although he didn't understand what was going on, the dangerous aura in the air had already dissipated. The trace of the will of heaven and earth returned to the world, and the majestic sword intent that formed the five elements divine beast returned to Lin Ran's control. Seeing this, Lin Ran had no time to think too much about it. With a wave of his hand, the five elements divine beasts dissipated with the sword intent. The taiji pattern that was slowly rotating in the air also dimmed out and was absorbed into Lin Ran's body. After the chaos was resolved, Lin Ran let out a long breath, but there was a hint of confusion in his eyes. I didn't expect the exorcism sword energy to be summoned on its own and take the initiative to attack. Could it be that that trace of the will of the world is not righteous? When the sword intent went out of his control, Lin Ran did feel a ruthless aura. It was definitely not his own sword intent. However, that feeling only lasted for a moment. Now that he thought about it, it was so short that it seemed like an illusion. Lin Ran frowned and fell into deep thought. He did not know that the situation over Mount Sword had caused a huge commotion in the world. In the imperial court, the civil and military officials lined up neatly and congratulated the emperor in unison. Congratulations, Your Majesty. The 10-mile sword god has advanced to another realm again. Our heavenly saint dynasty will definitely be prosperous for generations to come. In the market, whether it was the rich merchants or the commoners, they were all discussing the five elements divine beasts on Mount Sword and the yin-yang image that covered the sky. Some people said that the sword god was eliminating demons, while others said that the sword god was intimidating the enemy. In short, the sword god had been in seclusion for decades. Even though he was still famous, his influence had reduced greatly in the passage of time. Lin Ran's act today caused an uproar across the dynasty and aroused the reverence of the people for the 10-mile sword god. At this moment, Lin Ran, who was looked up to by thousands upon thousands, was sitting on the mountaintop and scratching his head. If he wanted to figure out if that trace of the will of the world was evil or not, the only way was to summon the five elements divine beasts again and force that trace of the will to show up. However, the feeling of losing control of the sword intent just now really frightened Lin Ran. Even though he had the exorcism sword energy in his body, he could not guarantee that he could still control it this time. In the end, Lin Ran shook his head and stood up. In any case, as long as he didn't trigger that will of the world, he would be fine. Why should he worry? It wouldn't be too late to study the will of the world when he entered the Saint Realm in the future. After returning to his residence, Lin Ran washed up, changed into black clothes, and rode his sword towards the palace. He had once promised to help the Empress deal with those martial artists who had participated in the rebellion. Now that he was about to go down the mountain to do it, it was only right for him to go and bid farewell to her. In the imperial court, the Empress was sitting on the dragon throne in a dragon robe. Although she looked solemn, there was a hint of anxiety in her eyes. Others thought that the phenomenon was caused by the sword god, but she clearly felt a trace of ruthlessness in the majestic sword intent just now. The Empress knew Lin Ran very well. It was impossible for him to have such a ruthless sword intent. She couldn't wait to go to Mount Sword to investigate, but the ministers kept on saying that it was an auspicious sign from the heavens and a banquet should be held to celebrate it. Seeing that the new minister was still talking non-stop, the Empress was about to leave when she suddenly heard a eunuch outside the hall shout, "Your Majesty! The 10-mile sword god is here to see you." Before the eunuch could finish speaking, a black figure wrapped in endless sword intent had already appeared in the imperial court. Chapter 45. Sword God comes out of seclusion. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 45. Sword God comes out of seclusion. Jade Token Message Translator. Henyi Translations Editor. Henyi Translations. The black-robed man appeared out of thin air. Although his face could not be seen clearly, the majestic sword intent lingering around him made his identity obvious. The civil and military officials immediately bowed. "Welcome, Sword God." When the Empress heard this, an imperceptible smile flashed across her eyes. Then, she ordered with a dignified expression, "I have something to discuss with Sword God. Everyone, leave first." "Yes, Your Majesty." The civil and military officials left the hall. The Empress waved her hand and dismissed the palace maids and eunuchs around her. In the huge palace, only the Empress and the 10-mile Sword God were left. "Phew. I'm really suffocating." Lin Ran took off his mask and took a long breath. Then, he smiled and cupped his hands at the Empress. "I'm the commander of the Imperial Guards. My greetings, Your Majesty. Bnoel.m. No need for formalities." The Empress raised her hand gently and stared at Lin Ran with a frown for a long time. After confirming that there was nothing unusual, the worry in her eyes dissipated. She chuckled and said, "It's been a few days since we last met. Lord Lin, your cultivation has really improved." "Your Majesty, please don't tease me." Lin Ran smiled and replied, "I just consolidated my half-saint cultivation. What's there to shout about? Isn't that something worth shouting about?" The smile on the Empress's beautiful face deepened. "If I remember correctly, when Lord Lin came to the palace to meet me back then, you hadn't even touched the threshold of a martial master. In just a few years, you stepped into the half-saint realm. This speed of advancement is unprecedented." Well, Lin Ran stopped in mid-sentence. If they continued to chat, they would probably touch on his biggest secret. He changed the topic and said, "Your Majesty, I'm here today to bid you farewell." "Farewell." The Empress was stunned for a moment before realization dawned on her. "You're leaving?" Lin Ran nodded. The Empress asked again, "When King Zhao rebelled, most of the martial artists who participated in the rebellion were just hooligans. When they saw that the situation was bad, they fled immediately. Do you have any clues?" Back then, the Tao-seeking sect was in charge of gathering and leading the martial artists. As for the scattered bandits, I'll find out after I capture the Tao-seeking sect's sect master." Lin Ran replied without thinking. His tone was so relaxed that it was as if he was saying, "I'm going home to get something." The Empress could not help but feel a little surprised when she heard this. Although the Tao-seeking sect was not the #1 sect in the world, its strength was not to be underestimated since it was chosen by King Zhao to help. However, seeing Lin Ran's indifferent expression, the Empress was relieved. With Lin Ran's current strength, the Tao-seeking sect was indeed nothing to him. After thinking for a moment, the Empress said, "Since you already have a plan, I won't stop you. However, can you stay in the palace for a few more days?" "Stay a few more days?" Lin Ran was puzzled. Seeing that the Empress was about to say something, he suddenly had an ominous feeling. "Did you take in another concubine? What are you thinking?" The Empress slapped the dragon throne, and her pretty face turned red from embarrassment. She pretended to be calm and said, "Just now, you caused a commotion in Mount Sword. Rumor has it that the Sword God is about to come out of seclusion. If you leave in such a hurry, people will think that I sent you to defeat the enemy because the dynasty is under threat." Only then did Lin Ran understand what the Empress meant. He couldn't help but blush and cough awkwardly. "In that case, I'll stay in the palace for a few more days. However, the rumors about the Sword God coming out of his seclusion have already spread. I'm afraid the Tao-seeking sect won't sit back and do nothing. As he spoke, Lin Ran took out the jade token that Daoist Li had given him. He left a wisp of sword intent in it. Then, he threw it gently, and the jade token turned into a stream of light and disappeared into the sky. When the Empress saw how powerful Lin Ran was, her eyes lit up. She paused for a moment and continued, "Later, I'll arrange a quiet place for you to cultivate in peace. However, I hope that you can come out occasionally as the 10 Miles Sword God. Now that the rebels have not been eliminated, you want the presence of the Sword God to intimidate them, right?" Lin Ran guessed what the Empress was thinking and cupped his hands with a smile. "Don't worry, boss. I will do what you said." The Empress frowned slightly, not understanding what "boss" meant. However, she had known Lin Ran for a long time and knew that he often said strange things, so she didn't mind. After gesturing for Lin Ran to cover his face with a mask, the Empress called over the chief eunuch, Li Tianyi, and instructed, "Sword God will stay in Mingzhou Hall for a few more days. Pass down my order that Sword God can come and go as he pleases. No one is to stop him." Li Tianyi bowed and accepted the decree. Facing the 10 Mile Sword God, his attitude became much more respectful. He bowed and invited Lin Ran out of the hall. The Empress looked at the empty imperial court, but she was no longer as confused as before. Now that Lin Ran was already a half-saint, he was undoubtedly her greatest aid. What she had always wanted to do could finally begin. "Father, Grandpa Sword God, just watch. I will definitely bring our heavenly saint dynasty to its former glory." The Empress looked somewhere and muttered to herself. Her beautiful eyes were filled with determination. 70 miles north of the capital, at the top of Tianjue Peak, the Tao-seeking sect. Sect Master Zhou sat cross-legged in the stone room and looked at the word calmness carved on the wall. However, he could not calm down no matter what. It had been a few days since the battle in the imperial city, but the heavily injured elder Xie showed no signs of waking up. Not to mention the countless disciples of the Tao-seeking sect who had died, it could be said that the Tao-seeking sect's 100-year-old foundation had been destroyed. Boom! Sect Master Zhou shattered the stone wall in front of him with a punch, his eyes filled with ruthlessness. "Damn King Zhao!" He said that he would definitely be able to overthrow the new emperor, but in the end, a mountain guard caused my sect to suffer heavy casualties. As for seeing the sword god's broken sword, I'm afraid he was just spouting nonsense. The true qi in his body surged. Sect Master Zhou could no longer hold it in and simply stood up to leave the stone room. As soon as he left, a sect disciple ran over anxiously. "Sect Master. Something bad has happened." The disciple came close and knelt down. He pointed at Mount Sword and said with a trembling voice, "When you were cultivating just now, divine beasts appeared above Mount Sword. Rumor has it that the 10 Miles Sword God has come out of seclusion." "What?" Sect Master Zhou was shocked when he heard this. A mere mountain guardian was able to beat up an elder of his sect to the point of being unable to fight back. If the sword god personally took action, his Tao-seeking sect would probably disappear from the world. Without wasting any time to think, Sect Master Zhou hurriedly ordered, "Pass down my orders. Everyone, pack your things immediately. Before noon today, everyone will retreat from Tianjue Peak. Meet at the border in 10 days. Yes." Just as the disciple opened his mouth to say, "Yes," another disciple ran over in a panic with a jade token in his hand. Before he got close, he shouted anxiously, "Sect Master." Just now, a sword energy broke through the mountain gate and turned into a jade token when it landed. Please take a look. Chapter 46. An unexpected turn of attitude. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 46. An unexpected turn of attitude. Translator. Henyi Translations Editor. Henyi Translations. Sect Master Zhou raised his hand and grabbed the jade token. The quality and workmanship were only average. On the front were the words, Mount Sword Token. It's from Mount Sword. Sect Master Zhou frowned slightly and subconsciously looked intently at the jade token. In an instant, his expression changed drastically, as if his entire body was being pointed at by countless sharp blades. If he moved slightly, he would be cut into minced meat. At the same time, an extremely dignified voice sounded in his mind. I'll visit you soon. Sect Master Zhou, please wait. If you dare to run away, there will be no place for you in the world. The sword intent dissipated in an instant, but Sect Master Zhou's clothes were already drenched in cold sweat. His face was pale and he was trembling as if he had just experienced a life-and-death battle. Sect Master. Are you all right? The disciple hurriedly went forward to ask, but Sect Master Zhou was in no mood to answer. The dignified voice seemed to still echo in his ears. He could not help but think of the terrifying scene of a young man defeating the entire army with a tree branch and severely injuring Elder Xia with a single strike. It's Lin Ran. It's that mountain guard. Sect Master Zhou muttered to himself with lingering fear, his eyes filled with deep despair. Without a doubt, this jade token was sent by Lin Ran. The two disciples looked at each other, completely unaware of what had happened. One of them took the jade token and examined it carefully, but the sword intent in it had already dissipated. Naturally, they could not find any clues. They only knew that their sect master was frightened out of his wits by a Mount Sword token. Many years later, this matter was still a laughing-stock circulating among the martial artists. As the sender of this token, Lin Ran did not know what an impact the token had left. At this moment, he was eating the delicacies sent by the imperial kitchen in Mingzhou Hall. After eating half the table of delicacies, Lin Ran burped with satisfaction. In fact, with Lin Ran's current realm, he could already abstain from eating. However, the delicacies in the palace were too tempting. Compared to the simple meals in Mount Sword, they were simply irresistible. After eating and drinking his fill, Lin Ran changed into the clothes of the guard commander and prepared to go out for a walk. After all, in the disguise of the sword god, he had to maintain the surging sword intent at all times. It was too tiring. Lin Ran was already familiar with the palace. After strolling for a while, he suddenly encountered a group of guards walking towards him. The leader wore a purple gold crown and a red toothed sea python robe. He looked extraordinary and dignified. Seeing Lin Ran walking over from afar, the man's eyes lit up. He immediately rushed forward and knelt on the ground. Greetings, Commander Lin. I'm Zhou Hao. It's you. Lin Ran recognized the person. It was Zhou Hao, who was ranked second in the martial arts examination with him. He couldn't help but feel puzzled. The last time the two of them met, Zhou Hao looked down at him. The sudden change of attitude made Lin Ran confused. The accompanying guards with Zhou Hao were also puzzled. They didn't know Lin Ran's strength yet and thought that he didn't deserve the title of the commander of Imperial Guards. Seeing this, they couldn't help but tease him. Yo! Isn't this the commander of the guards, Lord Lin? You must be happy to have Lord Zhou bow to you, right? I guess so. Look at how smug he is. Don't be arrogant. You were lucky to become the commander of the guards. When His Majesty finds out that you're not qualified, you will be severely punished. Hearing them ridiculing Lin Ran, Zhou Hao's face turned pale as he knelt on the ground. He hurriedly turned around and shouted sternly, "How dare you! Not only did you not greet Lord Lin, but you're even behaving so impudently. Slap yourself 20 times. The guards thought that Zhou Hao was mocking Lin Ran, so no one took it seriously and was still jeering. Seeing this, Zhou Hao became even angrier. He stood up and walked to them. He raised his hand and knocked one of them to the ground. I asked you to slap yourself 20 times. Didn't you hear me? Only then did the guards realize that he was serious. They immediately panicked and looked at each other, not knowing what to do. Seeing that everyone was disobeying, Zhou Hao felt embarrassed. His eyes turned cold and he was about to do it himself when he heard Lin Ran ask in a low voice, "Lord Zhou, what is this show you put on about?" "Lord Lin, I'm teaching them to show respect to you." Zhou Hao hurriedly turned around and replied with a flattering smile. "These guys are insensible. I didn't teach them well. Don't worry, I'll teach them a lesson later." Lin Ran was no longer the same as before, but when he saw Zhou Hao's attitude, he couldn't help but be curious. "What I mean is, why did you do this?" "Lord Lin." "Because I sincerely admire your strength." Zhou Hao cupped his hands and replied with a serious expression, "I was lucky enough to participate in the same examination with you last time and learned a lot. It also made me realize that your strength is beyond my reach. Therefore, after I returned, I told myself that you were the role model from whom I should learn for the rest of my life." After hearing his speech, Lin Ran interpreted it as Zhou Hao was scared out of his wits. He could not help but find it funny. He did not expect Zhou Hao to be a sensible person even though he looked arrogant. After figuring out the reason, Lin Ran was no longer in the mood to stay. He chuckled and turned to leave. Unexpectedly, Zhou Hao followed him again. Lin Ran frowned and asked coldly, "What's the matter?" Zhou Hao smiled obsequiously and said, "Lord Lin, I'm afraid you're not familiar with the palace. Where are you going? I can lead the way for you." Lin Ran had a strange expression on his face. He thought to himself, "I know the palace better than you." However, he could not say this out loud. After all, in the eyes of others, he took office only a few days ago. If he showed that he was familiar with the palace, it might arouse suspicion. Thinking of this, Lin Ran's expression turned serious. "Thank you then, Lord Zhou." "What are you talking about, Lord Lin? It's my great fortune to be able to serve you." Without another word, Zhou Hao knelt down again with a pious attitude, making his subordinates dumbfounded. Actually, Lin Ran came out because he wanted to take a walk after a big meal. He didn't have any special purpose, so he asked Zhou Hao to show him around. Unknowingly, they arrived near the imperial garden. This was the garden for the royal family. Even with Lin Ran's official status, he was not allowed to enter unless summoned. After introducing the garden briefly, Zhou Hao was about to lead Lin Ran away when a purple-robed figure walked out of the garden. It was the head eunuch, Li Tianyi. "Greetings, Inunch Li." Zhou Hao hurriedly knelt down. The guards he brought also knelt down. In this way, Lin Ran, who was still standing on the spot, was especially conspicuous. Li Tianyi naturally knew Lin Ran. It was his idea to let Lin Ran go to Mount Sword. Although Lin Ran had been transferred back to the palace, he was only a commander of the guards. Seeing that he did not kneel, Li Tianyi was immediately displeased. He made up his mind to teach this arrogant kid a lesson. Chapter 47. The Unexpected Effect of the Nine. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 47. The Unexpected Effect of the Nine Yin Yang Swords. Translator. Henyi Translations Editor. Henyi Translations. As he thought about it, Li Tianyi approached and narrowed his eyes at Lin Ran. He sneered and said, "Lord Lin, why didn't you greet me when you saw me? Do you think your status is above me?" Hearing displeasure in Li Tianyi's tone, Zhou Hao's heart skipped a beat. He hurriedly tugged at Lin Ran's clothes, indicating for him to quickly bow. However, Lin Ran didn't seem to notice. He looked at Li Tianyi and said calmly, "Eunuchly, you're really humorous. You're just a fourth-grade official, and I'm the commander of the Imperial Guards. You should be the one bowing to me, right?" Zhou Hao cursed in his heart. Although Lin Ran was right, this was not how things worked in the palace. Although Li Tianyi was only a fourth-grade eunuch, he was the one with the emperor most of the time. Even the first-grade officials in the imperial court had to greet him when they saw Li Tianyi. Lin Jiu was clearly trying to give Li Tianyi a hard time by bringing up official rank. As expected, when Zhou Hao raised his head, he saw that Li Tianyi's expression was as dark as an inkpot. His mind raced as he hurriedly explained, "Eunuch Li, Commander Lin is new to the palace and is not familiar with these rules. Please don't take offense. Lord Lin, quickly greet Eunuch Li." As he spoke, he tried to pull Lin Ran to the ground, but no matter how hard he tried, Lin Ran stood there like a mountain. Seeing that Li Tianyi's expression was getting uglier and uglier, Zhou Hao was so anxious that he was about to sweat. At this moment, Lin Ran said in a low voice, "You're also third-grade guards. You're not supposed to bend your knees to him." Before he could finish speaking, Lin Ran quietly released a wisp of sword intent, causing a strong vortex to rise on the ground. Zhou Hao and the guards were forcefully helped up. Li Tianyi couldn't take it anymore. He pointed at Lin Ran and shouted, "Lin Ran! How dare you?" Lin Ran sneered and didn't care. He looked at Li Tianyi and asked calmly, "I still have to patrol the palace. If there is nothing, I'll take my leave." With that, Lin Ran turned around and left. Li Tianyi gritted his teeth and was silent for a moment before saying, "Lord Lin, please wait. His Majesty summons you to the Imperial Garden. Please follow me." Hearing that the Empress was looking for him, Lin Ran stopped in his tracks. He turned around and gestured to Li Tianyi. "Please lead the way, Eunuch Li." "Sure." Li Tianyi nodded with a faint smile. Anyone could tell that he was up to no good. Seeing this, Zhou Hao couldn't help but worry. He brushed the dust off his clothes and was about to follow when Li Tianyi glared at him. "His Majesty only summons Commander Lin. The rest of you can go back." With that, Li Tianyi went straight into the Imperial Garden. Lin Ran followed him without hesitation. In order to help the Empress, Lin Ran had stayed in the palace for a period of time, but this was the first time he had come to the Imperial Garden. Lin Ran, who was used to seeing strange rocks on Mount Sword, felt that his mind was blown away when he saw the endless exotic flowers. After walking for a while and passing by an empty path, Li Tianyi, who was leading the way, suddenly stopped. Lin Ran felt that something was wrong, but he asked despite knowing the answer, "Why did you stop, Eunuch Li? It doesn't look like the Emperor is here." "Lord Lin, you must be joking. His Majesty is still far ahead." Li Tianyi pointed ahead and glanced at Lin Ran with a smile. "Back then, Lord Lin came out first in the examination but was sent to be a mountain guardian by me. I wonder if you resent me for doing that." "Eunuch Li, you must be joking. If you didn't let me go to Mount Sword back then, I'm afraid I wouldn't be where I am today. Speaking of which, I have to thank you." Lin Ran smiled sincerely. Although he didn't have a good impression of Li Tianyi, he was sincerely grateful to this damn eunuch for sending him to Mount Sword. Li Tianyi let out some strange laughter. It was obvious that he didn't believe Lin Ran, but he still said, "Actually, I did it on purpose back then for your own good. Commander Lin, you won the examination at such a young age. If you got too high an official position, I'm afraid you'd be too cocky. It was beneficial for you to train yourself for a few years on Mount Sword." Lin Ran laughed in his heart, but he looked like he was grateful. He said bitterly, "So what Eunuch Li did back then was actually so meaningful. I thought it was because I didn't give you a gift, so you deliberately made things difficult for me. I misunderstood." Hearing Lin Ran's words of gratitude, Li Tianyi didn't know whether he should feel relieved or not. After taking a few breaths, Li Tianyi continued with a smile, "Let's not talk about the past. Since you've been transferred back to the palace, it's best for you to learn the ways of the palace. Being an official here is not that easy. If you don't have a backer, you might offend someone you shouldn't and lose your head." Given how smart Lin Ran was, he could naturally tell that Li Tianyi was asking for benefits. He reached out and took off the commander's token on his waist. He said seriously, "I understand. It's just that I came out in a hurry today and didn't bring anything valuable. This thing was given to me by His Majesty. Please take it." What a blockhead! Li Tianyi cursed in his mind. Looking at the pure gold waist token of the commander of the Imperial Guards, he gritted his teeth so hard that they were about to shatter. Commander Lin, you must be joking. That was just a kind reminder from me. I didn't mean anything. Let's continue walking and not make His Majesty wait. Li Tianyi forced a smile and left in a hurry. He was greedy, but he did not dare to take the waist token given to Lin Ran by the Emperor. If it was found out that the token was in his possession, even if he had 1,000 heads, it wouldn't be enough. Looking at Li Tianyi walking in front hurriedly, Lin Ran couldn't help but smile. With such a clown around, it seemed that he would not be too bored in the palace these few days. Lin Ran put back the token and followed Li Tianyi. They walked around a goldfish pond and finally saw the Empress in an exquisite octagonal pavilion. Accompanying her was a concubine. Lin Ran recognized her as Consort Rong of the Cloud Prayer Palace, the daughter of General Guofujian. It had only been a few days since they last met, but Consort Rong seemed to have become bustier. Good Lord! Hers is almost as good as Consort Jean of the Lotus Palace. I didn't know that the 9 yin yang swords had this utility. Lin Ran was so lost in thought that his gaze continued to linger on Consort Rong. When the Empress saw this, she couldn't help but look down on him in her heart. She thought to herself that all the men in the world were the same. Back then, Lin Ran was full of righteousness and morality, but now that he saw the consort, he couldn't take his eyes off of her. Chapter 48. A Mission at Night. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 48. A Mission at Night. Translator. Henyi Translations Editor. Henyi Translations. However, they were in public after all. The Empress did not show disdain on her face. She cleared her throat and asked, Lord Lin, how have you been doing in the palace for the past few days? Hearing the Empress's voice, Lin Ran came back to his senses and knelt on one knee. Thank you for your concern, Your Majesty. I'm doing very well in the palace. Stand up. The Empress waved her hand and said with a faint smile, in that case, I'll arrange an errand for you. Your Majesty, at your service. Recently, I heard from Consort Rome that she's been hearing some strange sounds in the Cloud Prayer Palace every midnight. Consort Rome was so scared that she couldn't eat or sleep well. She also lost a lot of weight, so I decided to accompany Consort Rome tonight. Lord Lin, you are very capable, so I'll let you patrol the area around the Cloud Prayer Palace. When others heard this, they would not think too much about it, but Lin Ran instantly understood that Consort Rome was not pregnant yet. The Empress asked him to continue working hard at night. Lin Ran didn't want to agree. If he had the time, he would rather find somewhere quiet to cultivate. However, since the Empress had given the order, Lin Ran's refusal was equivalent to an offense punishable by death. Helpless, Lin Ran could only reply, Your Majesty, don't worry. I'll definitely patrol the area well. I won't let anyone get close to the Cloud Prayer Palace. What Lin Ran meant was that he would not get close to the Cloud Prayer Palace too. It was unknown if the Empress understood what he meant, but she changed the topic and said, Sword God is staying in the palace these days. He might take a walk in the palace at night. Pass down the order to let the guards not to stop Sword God when they see him. Yes, Your Majesty. Lin Ran cupped his hands and accepted the order, but he was cursing the Empress in his mind. Not only did he have to work hard at the Cloud Prayer Palace tonight, but he also had to take the time to pretend to be the Sword God. Even the donkeys in the production team were not used like this. As if having guessed what Lin Ran was thinking, the Empress's smile deepened. She waved her hand and said calmly, All right, if there's nothing else, you can leave first. Don't forget to patrol the Cloud Prayer Palace tonight. Then I'll take my leave first. Lin Ran agreed and stood up to leave. Before he left, he subconsciously looked at Consort Rome again. It was not that he was addicted to sex, but the change in her was a little shocking. At this moment, Consort Rome also looked at Lin Ran. Their eyes met, and a strange look suddenly flashed across Consort Rong's eyes. Seeing this, Lin Ran's heart skipped a beat. Could it be that she recognized him as the one who slept with her? The lights in the bedroom were dim, and the human skin mask given by the Empress was of excellent quality. There was definitely no flaw with the disguise. However, no matter how good the human skin mask was, it could not hide the eyes. At that time, the distance between the two of them was extremely close. Thinking of this, Lin Ran didn't dare to stay any longer. He hurriedly lowered his head to avoid Consort Rong's gaze and quickly left. After leaving the Imperial Garden, Zhou Hao and the others were still waiting outside. Seeing Lin Ran come out, Zhou Hao hurriedly went forward and smiled obsequiously. "Lord Lin, why did His Majesty summon you?" "Nothing. I'm asked by His Majesty to patrol the Cloud Prayer Palace tonight." Lin Ran replied casually. Unexpectedly, when Zhou Hao heard this, he suddenly revealed a happy expression. "Congratulations, sir." Lin Ran frowned in confusion. Zhou Hao explained in a low voice, "Sir, you might not know this, but I heard that His Majesty is going to the Cloud Prayer Palace to sleep tonight. Now, he wants you to patrol the area. Doesn't it mean that His Majesty values you very much?" "I see." Lin Ran smiled lightly. He instructed Zhou Hao to continue patrolling and return to Mingzhou Hall alone. After changing into black clothes, Lin Ran went out again and rode sword straight to the Imperial study. When the guard outside the door saw that someone had barged in, he immediately drew his saber and blocked the door of the Imperial study. After realizing that the person was the 10-mile sword god, he sheathed his saber and continued to guard. Lin Ran pushed open the door and walked into the Imperial study. The Empress was dealing with some state affairs. When she saw Lin Ran enter, she couldn't help but frown slightly. "You came too early. I will only depart for the Cloud Prayer Palace 2 hours later. I'm here to talk about this." Lin Ran took off his mask and smiled bitterly. "Your Majesty, I'm afraid you'll have to rely on yourself tonight." The Empress stopped what she was doing. "Rely on myself?" Lin Ran nodded. Although he was certain that no one was eavesdropping outside, he still subconsciously lowered his voice. "When we were in the Imperial Garden today, Consort Rong seemed to have recognized me." "What?" The Empress was also shocked when she heard this, but then she looked puzzled. "But how is that possible? The human skin mask I gave you was flawless. How could Consort Rong easily recognize you?" "You might not believe it, but I feel that she recognized my gaze," Lin Ran said with a strange expression. Then, he recounted how he and Consort Rong looked at each other. The Empress nodded slightly. "In that case, it's indeed possible for Consort Rong to discover something, but you want me to go and do that?" Lin Ran looked helpless. "I know you can't, but if I'm really recognized by Consort Rong, the consequences will be unimaginable." The Empress frowned and pondered for a moment. Suddenly, she chuckled. "That's easy. When you arrive at the Cloud Prayer Palace tonight, tell her that you're tired from dealing with state affairs and want to rest early. No matter how suspicious Consort Rong is, she can't force your eyes open, can she?" Lin Ran hesitated for a moment before nodding in agreement. Although this tactic could work, if Consort Rong touched something that she should not touch on Lin Ran, he would probably have to kill her to protect the Empress's secret. In the blink of an eye, the sky darkened. Li Tianyi's voice came from outside the Imperial study. "Your Majesty, it's getting late. You should go to the Cloud Prayer Palace to rest." "I know. Prepare the dragon carriage," the Empress replied loudly. Then, she looked at Lin Ran, who was disguised as her. "Believe in yourself. You can do it." Lin Ran smiled bitterly. However, the moment he stepped out of the Imperial study, his aura changed. His face was solemn, and his eyes were deep. He exuded the faint dignity of an emperor. "Let's go." With Li Tianyi's shout, Lin Ran was carried by more than 10 palace servants towards the direction of the Cloud Prayer Palace. In less than half an hour, he stood in front of the door. When he entered the room, the palace maids and eunuchs had already been dismissed. Consort Rong stood by the bed in a pink gauze robe. Her fair skin was faintly visible under the light, and there was a hint of shyness in her eyes. She had both the charm of a married woman and an innocent girl. "Your Majesty, I'll help you change." Consort Rong spoke softly like a bird. As she spoke, she walked behind Lin Ran and reached out to touch the jade belt on Lin Ran's waist. Just as Lin Ran was about to tell her he was tired, he suddenly felt a strong killing intent. Then, he tightened his waist and a cold glint flashed across his eyes. A cold voice shouted behind him, "Useless Emperor. Go to hell." Chapter 49. Unlucky Assassin. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 49. Unlucky Assassin. Translator. Henyi Translations Editor. Henyi Translations. A cold dagger quickly appeared in Lin Ran's vision. The long and narrow blade was about a foot long. The back of the blade had teeth, and the blade had a slot. The entire blade emitted a blue luster under the dim light. It was obvious that it had been coated with poison. In addition, Consort Rong had been hiding very well and only attacked at the last moment. If the Empress was standing here, death was surely unavoidable. Unfortunately, the person standing here was Lin Ran. He did not know why Consort Rong wanted to assassinate the Empress, but with his current cultivation level, Consort Rong's all-out attack was almost as slow as a nail. Seeing the saber beam coming at him, Lin Ran even had time to lean back. Feeling the soft touch on his back, he couldn't help but feel surprised by how busty she was. There was indeed something wrong with Consort Rong. Looks like this Consort Rong came prepared. Lin Ran thought to himself. At the same time, the sharp tip of the knife was about to touch his neck. Only until this moment did Lin Ran snap his fingers and shout, "Divine Sword Technique Manual." Clang! A long sword appeared in Lin Ran's hand. The sword was divided into black and white. It was the yin-yang sword he found near Mount Sword Seal. Metal. Endless sharp golden sword energy penetrated the short saber and a destructive aura instantly turned it into powder. Earth. A powerful sword energy with earth attribute shot out from the ground like an invisible python and climbed up Consort Rong's body. In an instant, it formed a sword cage and imprisoned Consort Rong. All of this happened within a matter of seconds. Lin Ran turned his body slightly and broke free from Consort Rong's arm. Looking at Consort Rong, who couldn't move, Lin Ran first sized her up carefully. Then, he reached out and touched the back of Consort Rong's ear. Then, he looked surprised. "You're not wearing a human skin mask." Seeing that her intentions had been exposed, Consort Rong no longer hid it. She stared at Lin Ran with hatred in her eyes and sneered. "Although the human skin mask is useful, there are subtle flaws when you look closely. Of course, I can't allow any flaws for such a big assassination. How did you discover it?" Lin Ran smiled and looked down from Consort Rong's face. "Because I have a photographic memory of women's figures." "Tell me, who sent you?" As he spoke, the powerful earth attribute sword energy transformed into sharp metal sword energy according to the 5 elements. Consort Rong was imprisoned by the sword energy cage. She felt countless cold swords stuck to her body, instantly scaring her until her face turned pale. Even so, Consort Rong still pretended to be calm and replied, "No one sent me here to do this. I just want to kill you, you useless emperor. Do you think I'm stupid?" Lin Ran sneered and looked at Consort Rong as if he was looking at an idiot. Consort Rong is the daughter of General Guo Fujian, who is in charge of the northern border. Previously, when the war in the north was lost, General Guo couldn't absolve himself from the blame. Fortunately, His Majesty was lenient enough to not kill him and asked him to stay in the north to kill the enemy and redeem himself. Consort Rong frowned at Lin Ran, her eyes filled with fear and confusion. She knew about this information, but she didn't know why Lin Ran mentioned this. Seeing that Consort Rong didn't understand, Lin Ran could only explain. Outsiders only thought that General Guo was grateful to His Majesty, so he left his only daughter here in the palace, but they don't know that it was Consort Rong who took the initiative to ask to stay in the palace. In other words, among all the consorts in the harem, Consort Rong is the last person who would want to kill His Majesty. You're unlucky. After hearing Lin Ran's explanation, Consort Rong's expression immediately became complicated. After a moment, she suddenly thought of something and narrowed her eyes. You kept saying His Majesty just now. Are you not, Aya? When Lin Ran realized the mistake he'd made, he slapped his forehead, but then he looked relieved. It's okay. You'll die sooner or later anyway. It doesn't matter if I let you know. As he spoke, Lin Ran grabbed the edge of the human skin mask and tore it open, revealing his original appearance. Although he was not as good-looking as the Empress, he was still considered handsome. Consort Rong was stunned for a moment before she smiled sadly. So the rumors are true. Unfortunately, I didn't have the chance to spread the news. Lin Ran looked puzzled. What rumor? Consort Rong looked at Lin Ran and smiled without saying anything. Lin Ran was a little anxious and tried to persuade her patiently. If you cooperate and tell me who's behind this, I can plead with His Majesty and spare you. Before he could finish his sentence, Consort Rong's face suddenly jerked. Then, dark red blood seeped out of the corner of her mouth, and her eyes became frighteningly wide open. Lin Ran quickly retracted his sword energy to save her. However, he did not expect the poison to be so strong that in the blink of an eye, Consort Rong was already dead. As the corpse fell to the ground, Lin Ran immediately felt a headache coming on. Now that Consort Rong had died, although she was fake, this face was flawless. Moreover, it was impossible for a person to disappear into thin air for no reason. If the fake Consort Rong died here, where was the real Consort Rong? Lin Ran had no idea what to do, so he could only go and inform the Empress of this matter first. However, Li Tianyi was guarding outside with a group of eunuchs. It was definitely impossible for him to go out like this. After thinking for a moment, Lin Ran gently took off his dragon robe and chanted, 5 elements sword technique, water. Outside the Cloud Prayer Palace, Li Tianyi was sitting on a rattan chair and drinking tea when he suddenly heard the sound of rain. The originally bright night sky was suddenly filled with dark clouds. Large raindrops fell from the sky, and in an instant, heavy rain poured down. That's strange. Didn't the imperial astronomer say that it won't rain this month? Li Tianyi held his teacup and muttered to himself. He did not notice that a drop of water had seeped out of the door and disappeared into the heavy rain. In imperial study. After the Empress finished dealing with the last state affair, she put down the brush and gently pinched the space between her eyebrows. Just as she was about to go to the dragon bed to rest for a moment, she accidentally saw a water droplet seeping in through the crack in the door. Then, it slowly twisted and turned into a human form in front of her eyes. Guard, don't shout. It's me. Just as the Empress was about to call for the guards to protect her, the waterman actually spoke. Moreover, his voice was very familiar. You're Lin Ran. Before she could finish speaking, the waterman quickly took shape. It was Lin Ran, who was wearing a yellow robe. Seeing this, the Empress heaved a sigh of relief. She frowned slightly and asked softly, why aren't you in the Cloud Prayer Palace in the middle of the night? What are you doing here? Where's your mask? It's a long story. Lin Ran sighed and looked at the Empress seriously. Someone wants you dead. Chapter 50. Life is unpredictable. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 50. Life is Unpredictable Translator. Henyi Translations Editor. Henyi Translations Lin Ran roughly explained what happened in the Cloud Prayer Palace. Seeing that the Empress was confused, Lin Ran said helplessly, I don't think I can explain it clearly. You should go take a look yourself. You want me to go? The Empress frowned slightly. Logically speaking, I indeed should go, but I don't have the ability to travel in the form of water like you. Now that the servants think that I'm in the Cloud Prayer Palace, how can I explain myself if I show up outside the door? That's a problem. Lin Ran rubbed his chin and fell into deep thought. He accidentally saw the scrolls stacked on the desk and suddenly had an idea. Your Majesty. Lin Ran smiled evilly. I just thought of a brilliant idea. Outside the Cloud Prayer Palace. Li Tianyi looked at the pouring rain worriedly, afraid that this sound would disturb the emperor. Li Tianyi's expression changed drastically when he saw water seeping into the door. He quickly called the young eunuch over and whispered, hurry up and fill up the crack. If His Majesty is disturbed, your head will not be on your body. A few eunuchs nodded. Some ran to get the tools, while others were afraid that it would be too late. They actually lay on the ground at the door and used their bodies to block the rainwater from seeping in. Unexpectedly, the rain came and went quickly. Before the eunuch who went to get the tools returned, the rain had already stopped. Li Tianyi heaved a sigh of relief when he saw this. Just as he was about to return to the rattan chair to rest, he saw a figure carrying a lantern pass through the door and walk over. Hey! How dare you come near this place? Li Tianyi shouted and immediately went to confront the figure. Only then did he see that it was the commander of the Imperial Guards, Lin Ran. Seeing Lin Ran, Li Tianyi's face darkened. He had been angered by this guy in the Imperial Garden during the day. He was just worrying about how to deal with this blockhead when he came. Li Tianyi stopped in front of Lin Ran and asked with a faint smile, Lord Lin, why are you in such a hurry? An urgent report from the border. I have to send it to His Majesty as soon as possible. Please make way. Lin Ran raised a scroll and wanted to move forward, but he realized that Li Tianyi had no intention of making way for him. Lord Lin, you came at the wrong time. His Majesty is already resting. Li Tianyi smiled faintly. His Majesty has been busy with state affairs for the past few days. He's really tired. Now that the war in the north is stable, I don't think there's anything important to be reported. Lord Lin, come back tomorrow morning. Lin Ran narrowed his eyes and exuded a faint aura of an emperor. It's not up to you to decide if there's anything urgent in the north. Intimidated by the regal aura, in a daze, Li Tianyi seemed to have seen the emperor standing in front of him. He was so frightened that his legs went weak and he knelt on the ground. Lin Ran snorted and walked past him. Only then did Li Tianyi react and quickly get up from the ground. Bdnvl thinking that he had been frightened by Lin Ran and embarrassed himself in public, Li Tianyi couldn't help but burn with anger. His face darkened as he turned around and shouted, stop him. Don't let him disturb His Majesty. The eunuchs hurriedly went forward, but before they could touch Lin Ran knocked on the door without hesitation. Your Majesty. An urgent report from the border. As soon as he finished speaking, the door was opened from the inside. The Empress stood in the door in a yellow robe. Oh, it's Lord Lin. Come in and talk. Thank you, Your Majesty. Lin Ran walked in and then closed the door. Li Tianyi looked at this scene and had a hard time processing it. After all, this was Consort Rome's bedroom. According to the rules of the palace, other than the eunuchs serving the consorts, even he, the head of eunuchs, was not allowed to enter. Otherwise, it would be a crime punishable by death. Li Tianyi was puzzled outside the hall. In the Cloud Prayer Palace, Lin Ran, who had just entered, raised his hand to touch his face, revealing a handsome face. Lord Lin, let me see that assassin. The two of them walked up to the corpse. In no time, the Empress understood the whole story. She frowned and asked softly, "So today, in the Imperial Garden, you realized that Consort Rome's gaze was strange. It's not that she recognized you, but she heard that I sent you here to patrol and was worried that you would get in her way. When did she sneak into the palace? I'm not sure, but it should have been a long time." Lin Ran replied seriously, "Consort Rome said that she can always hear strange sounds in the middle of the night and asked you to come to the Cloud Prayer Palace tonight. From the looks of it, this is also part of the assassin's plan. Think about it carefully. When did she say it the first time?" The Empress recalled for a moment before shaking her head. "I didn't pay much attention to it. However, since this person can disguise as Consort Rome, she must have a collaborator in the palace. Could they be with King Zhao too?" "Impossible." Lin Ran immediately shook his head. "You killed King Zhao and the men in his mansion. The women were all sent to the border. Even if his subordinates don't want to give up, it's useless even if they kill you now." "You are right. Is she a martial artist then?" "That's impossible too." Lin Ran shook his head again and pointed at the corpse on the ground with his chin. "This face is not a disguise, but plastic surgery. It will take at least a few years to prepare before the plastic surgery can be done so flawlessly. Those mob martial artists can't be so far sighted." The Empress's face immediately turned pale. Both her guesses were rejected. She really had no clue. At this moment, Lin Ran suddenly thought of something. "By the way, when she tried to assassinate me, the weapon she used was very special. Perhaps it can give us some clues." The Empress's eyes lit up. "Quick, show it to me." "This. I accidentally broke the weapon," Lin Ran replied awkwardly. Actually, he wasn't careless. He just felt that he could get some clues from the assassin, so he didn't care about the short saber. However, he did not expect the assassin to be so decisive. She took the poison immediately after the assassination failed without any hesitation. However, this was not a problem. Lin Ran found a brush and ink and sketched out the short saber with a few strokes. Although the lines were a little simple, with his supreme comprehension of sword intent, he managed to draw a pretty identical saber. The Empress took the paper and her expression changed. "It's actually him."